Hello there and welcome back to Slain. It's time to finally bring the fight to Raw as we assault his stronghold in Oldtown. Formerly a bustling market town, now its streets are desolate and deserted. Spectres hold sway here, tethered to the physical world by Lord Vraal's murderous malice. Rumors tell of armored apparitions that crush any unsuspecting mortals that stray into their path. It's wise to heed the hag's advice. In this initial part, you'll be switching frequently between fire and steel. So if you haven't mastered the skill of elemental switching on the fly, you're probably going to have a tough time here. It tends to be pretty obvious which enemies are weak to fire and which are weak to steel. All of the previous examples, of course, witches being weak to fire and ghosts and stuff being weak to steel. And then new variations of previous enemy types that are clearly weak to fire, such as those armored ice giants. Magic is also incredibly useful because if you charge up your shot, you can actually take out the ghost spawners even if they're hiding behind enemies, as long as you're close enough. Probably the most annoying part of this initial section of the level are these floating ghosts. As we've gone over before, they do mana damage before they do HP damage, so as long as you have mana in your bar, you're not actually going to take damage from them. But they do like to stun you while you're fighting other enemies, and so can be a bit of a bother, especially when they hop out of windows and houses all of a sudden like that. And even if they go off screen, they can end up coming back later to harry you, so you should try and take them out as soon as you see them, if you can. Otherwise, this level is just a straight gauntlet of wraiths and ghost spawners. So, nothing that we haven't dealt with before. And the occasional ice giant, of course. There you can see I accidentally switched to the ice axe. I can never seem to remember whether left or right is ice axe or fire sword. I always get them mixed up. One thing I will say about this level, I really like the haunting atmosphere it has. Not just due to the backgrounds and all the ghosts about, but also the music, which has a more haunting tone to it compared to the more metal themes we've had up till now. I think this is the first time that the game has been outright scary, I would say, since the Ghost Tower. And it's a welcome change, to be sure. Naturally, a level with witches is also going to have their giant variants who cause so much trouble for us. This one goes down quickly, but don't worry, there are encounters ahead with multiples of them that will prove quite troublesome indeed. They're responsible for quite a few deaths that I had to edit out. What I mentioned before, charging up your magic shot to take out a ghost spawner from afar makes things go a lot smoother. And as we descend into the witch's nest, the music ramps up appropriately. Gets us a little bit more pumped up for all the slaughtering of witches that we're going to be doing in the near future. And gargoyles too, because why not, the game hates you. That one there is poised perfectly to knock you into the lava, or blood I suppose, if you mistime your platforming. So you may notice that there are some witches in the background there, just kinda minding their own business, eating some sort of human flesh. Those ones didn't bother us, but that won't be the case in the future. This point right here is responsible for, if I recall, around 5 or 6 deaths. It's really rough because in order to aggro the larger witch, you need to walk close enough to cause the witches in the background to become alerted to your presence. And then you get ambushed by a second greater witch as well, and yeah, things don't go so well this first attempt. You pretty much need to do this perfectly if you want to survive. Take out those first 3 witches, take out the remainder, and then take out the first large witch before you get sandwiched between them. One thing that does help is that gargoyle statue on the right, as it gives you additional projectiles that you can deflect at the witch to take her out that much quicker. As you can see, I get a stun opportunity, although I failed to get close enough to actually make use of it. But she ended up going down pretty quickly anyway. And then it's just a matter of taking down the gargoyle statue. Now, you may be thinking, oh, that was really tough, clearly there's going to be a checkpoint soon, and there is, but if you want to get another secret, you have to do that first, before getting to the checkpoint, in addition to the previous gauntlet. Which is why, for my money, this is probably the toughest segment in the game. This secret here is actually especially nasty, since if you just stay in the middle there, you'll get sandwiched between 2 wraiths. It's best to go to the left wall. You're just out of range of the AoE after doing your first parry and riposte. And then once you finish off the first one, you can take out the second pretty easily. Also, for what little of the game is left, I think I'm just gonna call those attacks parrying and riposting now, like Dark Souls, rather than try and remember what terms this game specifically uses. You also notice that we're still missing one more piece of the medallion, even though I said there was only one left. I remembered poorly. Here we have a rare instance of a sprite reuse. This here looks just like the tree demon that we fought way back when as our first boss. He has the same melee attack as that boss, but rather than having thorns sprout out of the ground as his ranged attack, he instead summons ice meteors from the sky that you can reflect back for damage. And he's as easy as parry as the last one. However, when you get him down to half health, he starts this whole tornado attack. He does not exit out of this tornado for the rest of the fight, so you just have to hit him when you can. You can deflect his projectiles back at him for a bit of damage, but the most of your damage is going to come from magic attacks and well-spaced melee strikes. But he goes down easily enough. The second phase is only really dangerous if you get to it with very low health remaining. But we're not quite done with this level yet. Unlike the previous sewer level, this level actually has 2 parts to it. Now onto the Great Hall. Before this time of strife, the Great Hall served as a court of justice where citizens were treated fairly and with respect. Now the Grand Chambers instead echo with the wail of specters, and the ward of law has no place under its desecrated arches. To wit, it's another place that's been fucked up massively by Lord Vrawl. Yeah, you should listen to the hag's advice there about the scallywag flame soldiers. They're probably one of the more dangerous enemies in the game, as we'll be seeing in a little bit. In fact, this level introduces a few new enemy types, all of whom are incredibly lethal, appropriate of one of the final levels of the game. But of course it also brings back the oldies and goldies, such as the asshole skeleton mages. Seriously, I hate these enemies so much. I honestly think they're one of the most dangerous enemies in the game, just because of how well they synergize with other mobs of enemies. And I think even their upgraded version in the poison skeleton mage is actually less dangerous. I'd rather a projectile that's more likely to land at the ground and spawn a worthless enemy, than one that comes after me and does damage. So right there you see the second enemy that is introduced, and we're just gonna run away from that one. No need to kill it since we can just progress without doing so. Those enemies aren't especially dangerous, but they can be a pain in the ass to deal with. You also see these smaller spiders who are obliterated by magic, and there's the first flaming scallywag that the hag told us about. So they suck you in when you get close, so you literally can't flee. You have no choice but to parry and riposte their attacks, although you can also do charged attacks as well, even though it looks like their shield would block it. So that showing did not show exactly why they're so dangerous, but you'll be seeing that in just a second when we encounter the second one. So yeah, if they hit you and you're not guarding, they one-shot you. Fortunately, their parry timing is actually pretty lenient, but when you consider that you get one shot if you fuck it up, yeah, they're still pretty tough to deal with. Oh, and as a final fuck you, they explode into fire when they die. Doesn't do much damage, but if you happen to be at low health anyway, it could finish you off right as you kill them. So this spider we can't quite ignore. They spit these poison projectiles at you that leave those AoEs, so you really want to deflect them back at them, especially since it also serves as a good source of damage. However, when they die, they're not yet done harrowing you, as they leave several eggs which hatch into smaller spiders that I constantly forget about and walk into. Thankfully, the damage done is pretty minor, but again, if you happen to be at low HP, that can be enough to finish you off. If I recall right, I did mention before how when I played through these levels again in preparation for recording through them for the LP, that I realized I had just kind of completely forgotten about them. As in, there's one more proper level after this, and I thought that it just went straight from Oldtown to that. I completely forgot about both the Witch's Lair and this entire level, which is really odd because it's actually probably one of the better levels in terms of overall challenge. The enemy gauntlets here are pretty novel, include new enemies, and just pretty decently challenging. I think they do best with the level design the game has of just a straight gauntlet. It's a lot more involved than the simple puzzles that the other levels go for. So up ahead we have another spider that you're gonna want to draw back a bit, because that second spider is not the only dangerous enemy on this level. And if you just walk forwards, you're probably gonna get wrecked, because there is another flame skillywag up ahead. And if you have to deal with him, the smaller spiders that the larger spider spawns and the larger spider, you're probably gonna die, simply because you won't be able to parry his attacks thanks to the other enemies stunning you. Thankfully, if you deal with them before getting up to him, he's a piece of cake. Again, as long as you have your parry timing down. Remember, one mistake and you're dead. But with that, we've come to the end of the level. Time to face the boss. So something I'm gonna bring up about this boss here is that he reminds me a hell of a lot of a boss from another game that is entirely unrelated, but is similar enough that makes me wonder if the developers weren't making a reference to that boss. Good old House of the Dead 2. This boss here is Strength, named after the tarot card. A small imp following a invincible giant suit of armor. The armor cannot be harmed, while the imp is the true weak point and must be killed, but is often protected by the armor. Meanwhile, the imp supports the armor by constantly throwing out fireballs. That describes both of the fights perfectly, so I feel like it can't be a coincidence. Maybe they're both based off of some sort of mythological thing or a D&D monster that I'm not aware of. I don't know, but I just thought I'd throw that clip in there just because of how similar they are. So as for Malakesh, as I've already gone over, he throws out fireballs. The number increases as the fight goes on. At half health he throws out 2, and at around 2/3 health he throws out a third that is actually a bit different. Rather than just being a fireball that goes in a straight line, it's one of the ones that arcs downward and creates a huge AoE if it touches the ground. So if you deflect any back, have it be that one. As for the giant suit of armor, he does not change as the fight goes on, he just constantly sends out these earth tremors that you have to dodge. Neither of the attacks are all that dangerous on their own, but sometimes the two enemies end up staggering them such that they end up comboing very well, and to avoid one you have to get hit by the other unless you're a super godly player. Needless to say, I'm not, and the first attempt ends in a death, although it gets pretty damn close. Second attempt ends up going much more smoothly. One thing that helps with this fight is saving all of your magic meter towards the end, when Malakesh becomes more dangerous, and then just blitz through him with charged magic shots. So let's honor the Great Horn God of Metal then for the second time. Next time we make our way to the vile Lord Vrawl himself.